You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Matthew Betley.
Thanks for tuning in to Author Stories today. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you. Before we get into that, I'd like to tell you about some sponsors today. Crystal Pico Watanabe at Pico's House. The Pico's House website now has a new look. She's got a team of 8 people who help provide services to fiction authors. She has a full slate of services that now include beta reading. She's got 4 beta readers now. So if you're looking for beta reading services, she can definitely take on your project. Manuscript critique, developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. Authors can also inquire about putting their books in her Book Lovers Box, which is a monthly digital subscription box with a different theme each month. It's free to authors for a limited time. Be sure to check out Crystal and her whole team at Pico's House. That's PIKKOSHOUSE.com. Thanks, Crystal, for sponsoring the show. While cape and spandex movies are breaking box office records, comic book commentator and influencer Ed Gosney doesn't want us to forget the roots of these marvelous wonders. His blog, Cool Comics in My Collection at edgosney.com, covers the gamut of 4-color entertainment, from contemporary comic books to comics made for kids to bargain bin gold to classics that will transport you back in time. Comic books are a perfect blend of art and story, and Cool Comics captures the essence of what these funny books mean to us in a personal way. And make sure to join the Cool Comics in My Collection Facebook group, where members can interact, show off their prized comics, and have opportunities to win. You guessed it, Cool Comics. Published weekly, Cool Comics in My Collection aims to bring you a smile and reminds us why comic books are fun. Be sure to visit edgosney.com today. Speaking of superheroes and comics, my friend Patricia Gilliam has a fantastic series called The Heroes of Corvus. It begins with Book 1, a flight between a second-generation superhero named Red Bolt and a villain for hire named Icarus goes terribly wrong, resulting in the drowning deaths of 3 innocent civilians and orphaning a 6-year-old boy. Racked with guilt, Red Bolt visits Cameron Wilson at the hospital every night and won't leave the boy's side until he falls asleep. Befriended by a night shift nurse, the man in costume begins to disclose what really happened after the fight and why he feels the deaths of Cameron's parents and sister fall on his actions. A superhero didn't survive that night, and Cameron and the rest of the city aren't out of danger. This is such a phenomenal story. She has released up to part 4 now, and I cannot wait for part 5 to come out. If you're looking for a great adventure read that's on the cutting edge of what is in today's entertainment, The Heroes of Corvus is the series for you by Patricia Gilliam. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to go to hankgarner.com to subscribe to the show. We're on just about every platform you can imagine. Now stay tuned for our show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today I am super excited on this release day to have one of my favorite thriller writers back on the show. Matthew Betley was with me, I believe, around episode 380, so about 300 episodes ago now. He writes one of the series that I look forward to each summer. This series has, from the very beginning, has grabbed my attention, and I just love what you're doing. Welcome back to the show, Matthew.
Thanks, Hank. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually remember now when you went over 500 episodes, because everybody congratulated you.
That was so awesome, so awesome. Thanks to David at Atria, who sent in a bunch of well wishes from you guys, and it was so much fun. Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
So this series, the Logan West series, since we already asked the question that we always begin with on the last episode, there's a link to the last episode in the show notes for people that want to catch up. What is the most fun thing about writing this ongoing series for you?
So for me, it's the development of the characters, which some people might be surprised for me to hear, or might be surprised to hear from me, because I'm known for writing these huge, epic 60, 70-page action sequences. But to me, what really drives a story is the things that I put my characters through. Because as great as the action sequences are, unless the reader can relate to the character, it doesn't really matter. So I really try and grab the reader's attention by making them care about the characters. And I do it in very subtle ways throughout all my books. And so for this one, I put one particular character through the ringer in a really bad, brutal way. But that's been planned for 2 books because that leads to my next book, which I'm currently researching and about to start writing. No kidding, within the next 2 weeks or so.
Well, you're absolutely right. You could have a 5-page action sequence that is, down and dirty and gets right to the heart of the matter. But if I don't care about the characters and I don't feel jeopardy for those characters and I don't feel like I'm on mission with those characters, then none of that matters.
No, absolutely. And that's always been my goal. So for me, it's always characters first, no matter what.
Right. Exactly. Well, the series began with Overwatch. I think it came out around 2016.
It did.
And then the next year we got Oath of Honor, and I think that's when you were on the show last. And then you followed that up last summer with Field of Valor. And then this summer we've got Rules of War. Tell us can you just bring us up to speed for the folks that maybe didn't begin at the beginning, but where are we now and who are these main characters that we're going along with? Well,
without giving away too much of the plot, and first I want to thank all the listeners out there who have been constant readers since day one. But at the same time, I also want to talk to the new readers who are debating whether or not to pick up the series. With Rules of War, I intentionally wrote this in a way that readers who had never heard of Logan West could pick up this book and jump right into the middle of it. And I refer to events from the previous books in ways that don't take away from the pace. So you feel like you're caught up right away. In fact, I was on a show in Fox News. I was on the Daily Briefing with Dana PERINO back in June. And one of her TV producers read the book. And he told me that, and this was the greatest thing ever. He said, I didn't realize it was a series until I was like 70 pages in. And I said, then I succeeded. And he goes, yes, you did. And it was the greatest compliment I could have had at the time. So what he did, he ended up Googling it and then, caught himself up to speed just for fun. But he said it never took away from it. And that was my goal. I want to bring new readers to the exciting and very insane world of Logan West. Oh, and that goes back to your original question: is where are we with the 4th book? So, Rules of War picks up a few weeks after the events of Field of Valor. The vice president, which the readers know, who is a traitor to the United States. He was a member of this organization, one of the senior members of this shadowy organization that had been manipulating global events to create instability. He led a coup against the founder of that organization in the 3rd book, and without giving away too much so people could go back and get caught up on read Field of Valor, where we find our characters is hunting for the vice president who staged his own escape. The public thinks he's been captured by a militia, but in fact, he is fleeing the country and desperate to survive. And it triggers a race for Logan West and his task force to head first to the Caribbean, and then ultimately, for the last 70% of the book, we find ourselves in Venezuela. And, what was a ton of fun about this book is I started plotting it out 2 years ago because of the locales where all my other books take place. I had wanted to set something in South America, and I wanted to pick the most crumbling economy, the most chaotic country I could find. And honestly, when you just say that, there's only one right now in South America that fits that bill to the extreme, and that's Venezuela.
You nailed it.
Yeah, and it was a ton of fun to write, especially because of some of the locations I picked in and around Caracas, and it fit perfectly with the story.
It's crazy. So many questions to ask you. When you're writing a long running series now, four books is a lot of story. that you've got out there. The benefits of doing that is when you start a new book, you have all this world building, kind of air quotes world building, that you've done, and there's a certain shorthand that you have with readers that they can just kind of drop into the story because we know a lot of the characters, we know generally what's going on, and there's not a lot that you have to do for the readers. But the downside of that is, like you talked about, when a new reader comes in, are they lost? Can they enjoy this book without reading the other three, or can book 4 be an entryway to book 1? Are these things that you think about at the beginning of a book, and how do you juggle that?
No, I actually think about all the books like that. I consider myself writing a literary Marvel universe with a very violent storyline and a roller coaster ride. The Logan West amusement park, and each book is kind of its own ride, but they're all interconnected. And obviously, if you recall from Overwatch, there's a key character who shows back up in this, and I planned that since before I started writing book 2. And that was always my intent, just like I have plans for books 5 and 6 already in my head, and I'm already thinking past that. So that actually makes it a lot of fun, is how can I throw a curveball to the reader to go, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened, or I can't believe this person just showed up. Hopefully people are paying attention to, things that happened in Overwatch, things that happened in Oath of Honor, because in my mind, it's all interconnected. Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you catch those things, they kind of become building blocks for the story. But it also can just seem like an Easter egg. It's not on the surface. It's not necessarily important for the overall story, but the more story you tell, those things do start to matter. And it's kind of bonus content for readers that if you want to really pay attention, you start seeing the bigger picture overall.
Well, and in this one, it was critical, obviously, because of who that character is.
Exactly. You served in the Marine Corps.
I
did. Did your experiences there and your time in the Corps, do you think that they have informed, well, they've obviously informed, have they flavored the way that you write and the kinds of stories that you tell?
So they definitely gave me the background and the discipline and the tactical training so that I could write about weapon systems and how they perform in as an authentic way as possible, at least that I can do. But my Marine Corps experience, obviously, especially since Overwatch is an origin story for Logan West, and I tell that flashback sequence to an ambush at an insurgent compound in Overwatch over 3 parts, which, I had only been out of the Marine Corps, I think, a year when I started writing that book. So, as the series has developed, the Marine Corps is always present. I'm always referencing things in the Marine Corps. It for me will always be the underlying foundation for who I am as a person and not just a writer. And then that's why I made my characters, one former and one retired Marine.
Right. Describe Logan West for us, if you could, if you can. What are the things that you love about him, and that what is it about him that makes us want to root for him and to follow along with him?
Well, my intent, and the goal is for the readers to feel exactly the way that you just described. But the way that I view him is he is a man who is possessed with doing the right thing. At the beginning of Overwatch, when you meet him, he's emerging from a relapse blackout on page 1. And as my readers and fans know, I'm a recovering alcoholic, 10 plus years sober now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But when I started writing, I don't think I had been sober for a year and a half, honestly, at the time. So I kind of imbued Logan with the problem that I struggled with for a large part of my life. And so he is a man who found himself in a position where he was forced into doing the right thing. He had left the Marine Corps, after the events that happened in Fallujah, and he just wanted to be left alone. But unfortunately, the world came calling to him and forced him back to helped defend the country in Overwatch, and he pulled his right-hand man John Quick into the fold as well. And John Quick, when you meet him, is really off the grid, living alone in Montana. But the thing about Logan is that he knows what the right thing to do is, and he'll do it no matter what. You know, he is a man on a mission at all costs, and he makes those hard decisions like leaders have to do, especially when the choices might not be clear to other people. In his mind, he is a man of singular purpose, you know, a bit of a man on fire. He's obviously, you know, dashing model, good looks, those bright green eyes that mesmerize people and make him look like a predator. But you know, he's all about getting the job done. And the thing is, he's accepted it by this point in the story, that it's really up to him and the task force to help combat these forces that have been undermining our country as well as other countries throughout the series.
When you're writing a character like Logan, and you give him the same thing to struggle with that you are struggling with in real life, we all know that writing can be a very cathartic experience, and in some way, whether it's visible to the reader or not, I think a lot of times we kind of work through our own selves in the writing process. Is that a fair thing to do as a writer, to deal with kind of these big issues? And you know, the books are great entertainment, but they're also there are a lot of takeaways there for me as a man. When I'm reading, I see a little bit of myself in different things, and you know, Logan challenges me. You know, is that a fair thing to expect for readers to get from the books?
Absolutely. So, and I do that intentionally. In fact, you know, with Rules of War, there's a lot of parental themes running throughout.
Yes.
You know, things of sacrifice, like what would a parent do for a child? And I intentionally take those issues on and decide before I even start writing a book what those issues are going to be. You know, I'm 47 years old, so I understand what those issues are all about, and I love putting them down because they add such emotional depth to the characters. You know, that's my intent, at least, and hopefully the readers feel the same way. But yeah, I love getting into very gray area, realistic, authentic issues where, you know, my characters do something that at the end of Field of Valor that people might take issue with on a morality level. And you know, I actually really struggled with that, whether or not I wanted them to do it. And then I realized, yes, I did. You know, but the stories also, the stories have a life of their own. Like, I know what the story is going to be, but when I'm writing it, it is a dynamic living thing to me.
Well, and I think that's what separates, we've all read books that are agenda driven, and you know, you kind of roll your eyes and go, God, this is the preachiest thing I've ever read in my life, and you know, this is all about the author's agenda, but you have proven that you can start off with themes in mind, and the book not be about the themes. The themes are there and they get us thinking, but that's not the purpose of the story, if you will. Do you ever find yourself where you're writing a passage and you just kind of let it all out on the page and then read back and go, oh man, I've got to dial that back? You know, maybe that was just for me. Now let me go, you know, pull that back and edit that. Does that ever happen?
That does not happen, if I'm being honest. I'm very fortunate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, in that, no, that I in 4 books, and my editor can confirm this, I've never had a page cut out of any of my 4 books. In fact, I had a couple of pages cut out of Oath of Honor, and then when my initial editor left and I ended up with Emily Bestler, I said, hey, I really like these pages to go in. And she said, well, Matt, you know, she really knew her stuff and she knew what she was doing. And she did. My first editor was fantastic. A woman named Megan Reed. And she said, Meg knows what she's doing. And then Emily read the passages and she goes, okay, you're right. Insert them back into the story. And so I'm very fortunate in that I sit down and the way my writing process works, and I know other authors do it the same way. I write from a very intense emotional space. I know what the scene is going to be for the day. So I will pick music, like the scene in Rules of War that's just going to like rip people apart. I picked the soundtrack to the movie The Grey to write to. And if you've ever seen that movie, it is just one of the most raw, nerve-wracking, visceral movies about facing your mortality. So I was in that emotional trade space as I was writing that scene, like the whole, like 1,000%. You know, I was like bawling myself as I was writing it for real. And so I put on a headset. I know what I'm going to write. I put on the music, and I am lost. I am gone. I don't feel like an author. I feel like a scribe. I am seeing the action in my head. I'm hearing the dialogue. I'm feeling the emotion, and that's it. Next thing I know, I got like 3 pages or 6 pages or whatever I'm doing that day.
That's so awesome. How much planning goes into your books before you start writing them?
I don't use outlines. I organize it in my head. I know what I'm going to do. So, for example, like here's a great, right now with book 5, I had to go to the University of Maryland School of Theater, Dance, and Performance Activities yesterday for the origin backstory of one of my characters, because the book 5 is going to be all about this character, even though it takes place after the events of book 4. And so I know where the story is, and I've been doing the research, but I don't use outlines. I think I've written down one line, one sentence, but I could probably sit down and start writing and knock out the first 100, 150 pages right now if I had to. If someone put a gun to my head, which hopefully wouldn't happen.
Nice. Do you know the ending from the beginning?
I do. I absolutely do.
You know, people that are dedicated outliners will say that if you don't outline, then when you sit down to write each day, you know, there's going to be time wasted just staring at the screen because you haven't figured out what's going to happen yet. And the opposite side of that, the pantsers, will say, well, you outline the life of the story out of it if you outline too heavily in the beginning. I think most people are probably somewhere in the middle of that, the two strict camps are not as strict as it would seem.
Not for me. I'm the pants guy, flat out. I because I know what I'm going to write, and I don't need to write it down. So I sit down again because I write from such a visual, emotional space. Right. I feel like I'm just watching a movie in my head, literally watching a movie in my head and just describing it on the page, and that's it.
But you know the story before you start writing it. Yes. Even though you're not outlining on paper, you've, if you want to call it that, outlined it in your head. How do you start to, when you're first envisioning the story, are there exercises that you do as you think through it, as the movie starts to form?
No, I literally think it comes at me from all sorts of different areas. Like, I'll be in the shower and I'll be like, yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Or I'll be driving in my car, listening to something, and something will hit me, and I'll be like, yep, and I'll know it's right. I will get that feeling like where I absolutely know that idea is what will work for what I'm doing. It's a feeling. It's a gut feeling for me. I just know intuitively what I'm going to do. Right.
Are you an everyday writer?
Once I get started, yes, for the most part. Unless life intervenes or interferes.
Right. Do you hold your time and space as sacred? Do you have to be at a certain place at a certain time to write?
No, it's all over the place. It's just whenever I can get the time during that day. So usually in the evening.
Gotcha. One thing that I love about your books and about Logan West is that you paint these stories of a flawed hero in a flawed system, in a flawed country, but who has not given up hope. I think it's a very popular sentiment now to be hopeless and to be negative and critical to the point that everything is lost. Logan West loves his country, even when he doesn't love his government, even when he doesn't think things are right. And we use words like patriotism and treason, and those are not popular things with a lot of people and in a lot of places today. Could you kind of speak to that and the idea of right and wrong from Logan's perspective?
Well, from Logan's perspective, again, I'll speak to the fictional world in which he operates. I'm not going to get into the political morass that is today's reality. Yes,
I tried to throw it.
Good luck with that. My readers do know that I'm opinionated on Twitter, and that I have written columns for the Weekly Standard, Town Hall, and I'm working on something for National Review. So I am not afraid of politics, but honestly, more importantly, I don't care your politics as long as you enjoy my books. And I would love to hear. And in fact, I just met somebody yesterday who is the business director at this school I was visiting, who, after I called to make the appointment to go down there and do research, because when you call, people are like, "Hey, I'm an author with Simon Schuster." People are like, "Who are you?" So they look you up. And little did I know, in the last week, she read the first 2 books, and she is on the absolute,
Nice.
and she's now totally in love with the series, and she's on the opposite side of the political aisle from me, which was great because we talked about it. Because who cares?
Right.
So I'm always happy about that. And what was your original question? Because I had just totally sidestepped.
Just kind of Logan's worldview
so Logan's
and how you portray these things in the book that let us know that it's okay to love where you're from and not be happy with it at the same time.
Well, it depends. I've tried to create a realistic alternate universe, and so Logan is convinced he's on the right side of history. The members of his task force, they feel the same way, even though he's learned about this shadowy organization that's been undermining the Republic. And he views it as his job, because no one else is going to do it, to kind of straighten it out. He's questioned the president and his motivations, but at the same time, I create characters, and this goes back to something I think I heard Lee Child once say on the Fox News show Red Eye with Greg Gutfeld probably a decade ago. He said, writing is wish fulfillment. So in my fictional universe, like, the president will do the hard right thing. My one political comment you'll get for tonight on the reality is that our politicians don't make decisions and they're all morally corrupt. Now, that's not true 100% across the board, but it's largely true. Just look at this election that's going to take place soon. It's going to be a nightmare, and I'm going to get sick of it. But in my world, those politicians, regardless of their personal politics, will make those hard right decisions that are best for the country, not just their own political purposes.
Right.
Does that work for you?
That's perfect. That's perfect. I just wanted to watch you tap dance for a minute.
I don't tap dance. I like to stomp on something until it's dead.
No, that's fantastic. We were talking earlier about the book being in Venezuela, and when you started working on this a couple of years ago, there were murmurings of Venezuela, and if you watch the news, enough, you could see things coming. But when you're planning out, and a lot of times you're planning a book that's going to be out to people 2 years from now, in the beginning, how do you start, predicting what may or may not happen? And are you ever wary of wading too deeply into current events because things can turn on a dime?
No, I'm not. With this one, so number one, socialism is bad. Number two, their economy had collapsed to, was it 1,000,000% hyperinflation by 2016 or 2018? So it was already an absolute mess. It's just that people weren't paying attention to it unless you paid attention to international events. But the economies, when the price of oil collapsed across the globe, that Venezuela just went into a downward spiral that it's never never recovered from. So then what was wild though is, okay, so then how do I depict the Venezuelan president? I want to make sure that the Venezuelan intelligence services are involved. I want to have the Russians involved, because even though the Russians, what I don't like about a lot of thrillers today is the bad guys are always the Russians, right? Always the Russians. So in my books, the bad guys aren't the Russians. The bad guys can be the Americans. The bad guys can be the shadow organization. The bad guys can be the Secret Service. And I'm friends with a bunch of Secret Service guys who find it rather amusing. But the reality is I did want to put a Russian unit in Venezuela. And then all within the last 4 to 6 months, it's like, hey, the Russian military has a special unit in Venezuela. Hey, someone tried to assassinate the Venezuelan president. There's one major event that goes on in Rules of War, and I won't say what it is, but you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, if that happens, then I'm going to hit the trifecta.
How do you avoid those cliche things and look for new ways to scare people? Because what you're doing, you're scaring us about the things that could be that we're not paying attention to.
Well, in my case, I am. So, for example, book 5 is going to be about the origin story and main story about that character. There's a number of things that I'm developing still, the plot. And it's because a couple of articles, small articles, triggered something for me. And I'm like, you know what? It would be a really good thing to explore. Book 6, I know what I'm going to do, and it's going to be awesome because I've been wanting to do it for about 5 years. So I already know what that's going to be. And that's going to be something I don't think anybody's really written about yet that I'm aware. But then when I write it, it'll be self-evident and be like, yeah, I wonder why that is. It's because, here's the way I view it, without sounding arrogant about it or egotistical. I want to write these things my way, and that's it. And if I fail spectacularly, then I'll at least fail doing it my own way.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And at least if I'm still talking to you, I haven't failed yet completely.
When you're writing a long-running series with a series character, one of the tools that is taken away from you, it's kind of off the table, is the threat that Logan West is not going to make it out of this one. If we're talking about a Logan West book, and we're talking about Logan West books in the future, you can do a lot of things to Logan West, but there's a certain assumption that Logan's going to be there. How do you raise the stakes for a character like that, but knowing he has to show up again next time? And I know in this book you do something, and the last book you do some things to people close to him. Is that the go-to to get to him through other people?
It depends. For now, yes, but I have absolutely. There's only one character that is totally off limits for personal reasons, and but everybody else is fair game. I mean everybody. Do I want to off my main character? No. Would I, if the timing was right and it was done in a really, really intelligent way? Absolutely. But for now, I want to keep going with this series, and it's the Logan West series. So,
right.
But that
Exactly.
That doesn't mean everybody else is safe, has been explained from the previous books.
Exactly. At the end of this book, and there's this. I'm just going to say there's some serious fireworks in this book. At the end of it, when we're trying to catch our breath, and you close the back cover, and you're like, "Damn it, he did it again." What do you hope people are left with at the end of this book?
Every time you finish one of my books, I just want the reader to be thoroughly satisfied, to be like, wow, that was a fantastic ride. There's nothing, no cliffhanger. There's a way to do a cliffhanger, and then there's a way to not do a cliffhanger. For me, I'm not going to force a reader to worry about what's going to happen to a character for a year. Now, I might explain that I will definitely refer to other things are coming, but at the end of this one, I intentionally did it in a way that, okay, the organization's story arc for now has finally concluded, and now the next chapter in the series is coming next. But more importantly, again, I just want people to be sad. I'd like to feel like, wow, that was a fantastic ride. I'm exhausted, and they feel satisfied as a reader.
Well, you succeeded in this book. That's for sure. The book is called Rules of War. It is out everywhere when you're hearing this. Happy release day to you, Matthew. I love this book. I'm buying the audiobook today because I love the book and I want to support it, and I want to have it in my Audible client. It's available in hardback and Kindle edition and audiobook today. Matthew, if folks are just learning about you and want to, fill in the gaps and go back and catch up on everything, where can they find you online?
Thanks, Hank. First, they can follow me at Twitter at Matthew Betley. There's also a Facebook fan page. They can follow me at Matthew Betley. And then I have, of course, a webpage, which would be, you guessed it, MatthewBetley.com. and I try and keep all of those updated. And the books are available everywhere. So wherever books are sold, people can go back to the beginning if they're just getting started in the series.
And like you mentioned earlier, you don't have to come in with book one. You could jump in with this one, but I guarantee it will make you want to go back and fill in the gaps.
And what's really wild is that Overwatch continues to sell crazy. Especially after my appearance on Fox News a couple weeks ago. It's amazing. That book has legs, and I'm just thrilled and humbled that people are starting from the beginning in time to catch up, or started from the beginning in time to catch up to today's release.
Oh, that's what you want, for sure. Matthew, I'm a huge fan. You know that. I love the books. The new book, Rules of War, is amazing. I'm going to send everybody to pick up a copy and to visit you on your website and Twitter. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Hank. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe at hankgarner.com or on your favorite podcasting app. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
I'm melting! I'm melting! Cried Joey. Take the picture already! He stood with one arm around the bronze waist of the bewitched tribute statue, Samantha Stevens, riding a broom across a crescent moon. Jason tried in vain to frame the shot without any tourists in it, but that was impossible. From all points of the compass, a merry horde had arrived for Salem's 2-day summer psychic fair. All the commuter trains had burst open, like cornucopias filled beyond capacity, spilling endless fruits and nuts onto the red brick sidewalks of Essex Street. A vampiress in lavender shorts and feathered boots sold maple chocolate walnut fudge in front of the Witch City tattoo parlor. A near-naked gypsy in purple-green veils danced with a pheasant in her arms around a plug-in Hanukkah menorah. A fat man in a fetching blue jeans dress sold amethyst and citrine charm bracelets in front of Medusa Cafe, but his stand got knocked over by a one-armed crone driving a mobility scooter who sang "Choo-choo" as she passed, her stump on the wheel, her lipstick ghastly, her gnarled right hand raised in trailing plumes of noxious cigarette smoke. Chewbacca leapt out of her way and slapped sparks from his fur. He gave a disgruntled growl before going back to playing Summer Lovin' on his ukulele. The old one-armed dervish drove off, choo-choo, parting a crowd of wanderers, slack-jawed tourists with camera straps tight across their bellies, yellow-vested police on segways, elderly rollerbladers, face-painted infants and harried parents, and college girls. So many hot, hysterical college girls that you'd think somebody had napalmed a sorority house. Jason, are you deaf? Sorry. Jason raised the phone and took the shot. Joey inspected the photo and nodded in approval. Your turn. No, thanks. Do it, Shaggy. Don't make me hex you. Jason gave in and traded places. He put an arm around Samantha's metal back. Her bronze body had flushed in the afternoon sun, warm through his glove, but her eyes were weary. No, downright creepy. and her smile was forced, like a Disneyland princess who'd had her toe stomped. "Say chowder," cried Joey, who'd been practicing his New England accent all morning. "Come on, man. Say chowder." "Fine, chowder." Joey got the shot, and Jason surrendered Samantha to a chubby kid wearing a Gandalf beard who climbed up to worship her bronze bosom.